And you scoop the door.
Yeah.
It's door.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Oregon City Public Library Board to order. And the roll call is Cynthia Andrews is here, Nick Dierkman is, and Larry Osborne are by Zoom. Heidi Blackwell and Bill Parkin are here, and Lisa Oreskovich we're waiting for. And with that, first we have approval of minutes. The only minutes that are available at this time are we had an initial budget committee meeting. The January minutes will be available next month. Due to all the chaos in the library with the floors and the snow and everything, they just didn't get done. So, any comments on the budget committee meeting minutes?
Would that just be the individuals that were involved in it? I mean, that would approve that.
Yeah, well, the board will approve it, but were there any corrections or additions? Nick, any?
None from me.
I didn't see it. Okay, can I have
Motion to approve them.
Okay, good. Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Library director's report.
Okay, thank you, David. I will be very brief. We have some guests today, and I don't want to take up too much time. If there are any questions on any of the stats, I'll be happy to try to answer them. I will save a budget update when we get to our budget subcommittee update. The only thing I want to share, I hope to have a little more information. The two things I'll share, I don't yet have any information on the county task force, other than we heard at our directors group meeting that the county was very, very close to identifying who that group is going to be. And I hoped we would hear something this week, but we haven't heard yet. So I would anticipate that is imminent, that they will let us know who's going to be on that task force. I did confirm that all those task force meetings will be public meetings, so even, if I am not on that group, I will certainly be in person.
And I know Denise, our mayor, has expressed interest in being on it as well, so she may be one of the public division. If that's the case, Greg probably wouldn't, and so going to the meetings.
Yes, they're trying to make sure they have balance. They don't want to have 3 people from one city, on that. So, and then the other thing, I'll just give everybody a quick update on our procurement. We went through the first round of reviewing RFPs for self-checks and book lockers. We have identified some vendors. I can only share so much. We have identified, we went through and we scored vendors, and there are some we are going to seek some more information from, and possibly and hopefully demos of their products. That process is proceeding apace. I should be able to say more at our next. But just wanted to let everybody know that it's moving along.
Great. Any questions for the director?
The only stat that there was internet sessions there, it just said 3 that were reported. I was just curious on what the outage was or what.
It was because we were closed for the
Okay.
So the computers, the computers were generally not available. I would have to guess those 3 were probably some back end. I have to dig into
But
that.
I mean, the Wi-Fi was still.
Yes, Wi-Fi.
Those numbers were the same. It's just,
Yes, and Wi-Fi was available throughout the building when we were open. So again, that doesn't surprise me that those stayed the same. But yes, our public computers were completely down and out of the building. So yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay, great.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had one more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hope you've all the feedback we've received so far is positive.
Right. And I take it we'll change the sign on the door.
Yes, that is supposed to be happening. Our facilities manager has it on his calendar.
Great.
Those changes.
All right. Any public comment?
No.
No? Okay, great. So the discussion items, we've got a couple of guests today. Pete Walter from the city, and I don't know his guest.
Ryan Davis.
Ryan Davis are going to talk about climate-friendly and equitable communities presentation. I ask you to try to keep it to a maximum of 30 minutes with interaction so that
Right.
the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'll give a brief introduction, and given the time constraint, I understand we probably want to just hit the high points of what we've heard so far. So the big picture is that the state has required cities and counties throughout the state to look at their parking requirements as part of an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions under the understanding that parking can actually generate traffic if you have too much of it. So that's the basic premise behind a lot of this stuff. So a lot of cities throughout the metro region have already completely waived parking minimum requirements in their zoning code. Oregon City is a metro city and we already have minimum and maximum parking requirements, but these efforts are targeting the minimum parking and also the maximum parking as well. So we started this process with Brian's help as a consultant a few months ago, and we are under a deadline to adopt these largely prescriptive parking requirements by June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah, of this year. So we've met with several existing groups so far and gotten direction from the city commission on which way they would like Oregon City to go. So, the next step for staff is, I think we have a meeting tomorrow night with Pratt to discuss this. And then we will be moving into the drafting the code part of this. But Brian is the expert. He's also doing work for Cornelius on the same issue. So if you could just take us through the high points and perhaps give us an update on what we've been able to synthesize so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, so you get your PowerPoint up.
Sure. And I'll just compliment you guys while we do that. This is my first time, surprisingly, in the library, and I'm embarrassed I have not been up here before. It's a beautiful library. I have no idea how big it was. I walked by a million times, but just never stopped inside. And absolutely one of those shirts, they're great.
Well, thank you. Yeah. These are the special staff, so I can't share that.
Oh, no. Should sell those. That could be a good fundraiser.
And I'll be you just tell me when you want to advance.
Excellent. So I'll go ahead and advance and, what kind of, so let me just, kind of explain this. I'm assuming that maybe unlike, so the Planning Commission and some of the other standing commissions that we've talked to have kind of heard about some of this. I'm not sure how familiar you folks are with a lot of this planning work, the framework, et cetera. But essentially, the state of Oregon in 2007 said that we want to reduce our emissions 75% by 2050. We're massively off track to do that, particularly transportation sector. So how can we get back on track? And that's where a lot of, I'm going to say us, because I didn't have anything to do with it, but a lot of the people who are really nerdy about parking kind of laser focused on that because over the last 15, 20 years, really in the time since 2007, there's been a lot of research. There have been a lot of kind of aha moments regarding how we plan for parking. The key one, I'm not sure if you've heard of this name. Hopefully you have his book somewhere in your library because it's a fantastic one, probably the singular volume to check out if you want to know about parking. But it's by Donald Shute. It's called The High Cost of Free Parking. It came out in 2006. And it was just a really deep dive into how cities around the country are regulating parking and requiring parking minimums. And it really presented just a trove of evidence that the way we do parking is not really a healthy way. And I'll tell you the way we do it, and I'll tell you why. The way we tend to do it is with this approach that, if you have a certain land use you're building, say a restaurant, and it's certain that are, half empty, even on busy shopping days, even on Black Friday, famously, a lot of retail parking spaces are available in big lots and that sort of thing. So as part of CFEC, the state really has laser focused on this with the goal, and this is important, the goal is not to preclude the building of new parking. The goal rather is to allow developers, allow business owners the bandwidth to develop a parking plan that works for them. So it's kind of been one thing I have noticed doing parking for many, many years. People that are normally left of center on a lot of issues tend to be right of center on parking and vice versa. And I think this applies to two institutions as well. So you're normally fairly left, capital S state of Oregon is really kind of taking a very free market approach here and saying, okay, we're going to just waive a whole lot of these regulations and we're going to let the market decide how much parking is needed to support particular developments. So that is the 20,000 foot view. We'll look at some of the specific things that Oregon City is doing to kind of execute this as we advance to the next slide. So yeah, we can kind of skip this one. We're just here to kind of talk about this and get your feedback, get your thoughts. This is part of a mini, I guess, meeting, about a month and a half so far. We've been kind of going around, some combination of myself, Pete, and the community development director, Aquila, who I'm sure you probably know. I've been going to all of the various standing commissions and getting your, the goal is they want to target, especially these overbuilt parking lots, but still give cities the latitude to interpret their development code the way they want to and, shape the way their city grows and evolves over time. There are 3 compliance paths. I don't want needs on these, but Oregon City is adopting option 3. What is option 3?
Okay.
Yeah, essentially what it is, if you look at that transit map there, no matter what, you are not allowed to have minimum parking requirements within that area shown on that transit.
What do you mean by minimum parking requirements?
So minimum parking requirements, good question. That's the thing in the zoning code that says if you are building a 10,000 square foot restaurant, you must have at least, usually it's per 1,000 square feet. So say
Okay.
2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So in the case of a hypothetical minimum or hypothetical restaurant of 10,000 square feet, the zoning code would require, I'm not sure if this is around this, if it's not too, but something like 20 parking spaces.
There's also this prescribed, like having it be handicap accessible or ADA.
Yeah, there's a lot of other codes about ADA accessibility and that sort of thing as well, so, yeah.
And that's off-street parking.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
So within that area there, kind of under any path to compliance, the state is just requiring you to eliminate parking minimums within that area. And also adopt parking maximums, which is to say builders can build parking, but they can't build more than a certain amount per square feet. Works the same as minimums except in reverse, obviously. So what option 3 entails, you eliminate parking requirements there, and then you enact a number of other reforms, some of which you already have. So a key one is having parking meters, which of course you have. So that's another reason we chose option 3. We've already got a lot of these boxes checked in Oregon City. So essentially the compliance option that we're taking involves eliminating parking minimums there, and then reducing minimums for a certain number of uses, typically things like affordable housing or memory care facilities, things like that. Then there are a number of other kind of, just real quick. Yes, please.
This is the frequent transit corridor.
I'm sorry.
So which is like 4 bus stops an hour and that within a half mile of that, we can't require parking. And also within our downtown, which is considered a climate friendly area, we can't require parking. So that's taking in both of those areas.
Thank you, yeah. So that's one piece, and then the other piece are essentially things like, landscaping requirements and parking lots and those sorts of things. We'll talk a little about those next slide. So this is kind of what I just summarized. We can skip past. So what do we have to do here? As I said, eliminate parking requirements within that half-mile buffer of the frequent transit line. reduce or eliminate requirements. Yeah, so eliminate requirements for things like, small unit size apartments. I think it's less than 750 square feet. Mixed use developments, childcare facilities, bars and taverns, et cetera. You could read those. I won't go through all of them. And then for developments that include certain features, this is pretty interesting. The requirements will be reduced. So those features are solar power, wind power, EV charging, car sharing spaces, or accessible units. Those are residential units, not parking stalls. Accessible residential units above the minimum required. And I'm not sure offhand what code requires minimum units, if it's your development or state code, but additional units above that, you can go below parking requirements. Next slide. The other key changes in addition to those regulatory ones, or rather the policy ones, the minimum ones, are design changes. As I said, big parking lots, which are more than 1/2 acre, are required to do a number of things, include give carpools preferential treatment, allow redevelopment of parking spaces for bike parking or, bus stops, waiting areas, that sort of thing. Allow and encourage redevelopment of underused parking. That was an interesting one. We had a lot of conversation on through the outreach process. Essentially, that's encouraged to get things like, again, restaurants are a good example. Maybe you have more parking spaces than you need because code required 20 and you only need 10. Well, those 10 spaces or some portion of them could be very valuable as things like outdoor seating and that sort of thing. So the code intends to allow for that possibility while also giving Oregon City the ability to retain, the ability to regulate that through their development code the way they could now. So, shared parking is another one, and a key one that we spent a lot of time discussing during the process is what we want these to look like. So the state gives us 3 potential paths forward. One is to meet a tree canopy requirement that Oregon City almost already meets, but just has to adopt a couple minor tweaks to make sure we do meet it. The second way to make parking lots a little more climate friendly potentially, essentially we have to tweak your bike parking requirements a little bit. Bike parking the bike parking code in Oregon City is really pretty robust and pretty good from a design standpoint. So you don't have to do a lot there to meet those requirements, but there's another process that we probably hear a presentation on in the next couple of years, which is going to be an update of your transportation system plan, basically the big plan that kind of governs everything around how Oregon City, how people get around Oregon City. You'll have to adopt a few things there that make sure we provide for bike parking on the street in downtown Oregon City and small scale mobility devices, things like that, and do that in a certain number of ways that, make sure we maintain visibility corridors for pedestrians and those sorts of things as well. So some design requirements there, but a lot of things that several things that are applicable now, several things that are applicable later on down the road during that other process. Next slide, please, which will talk about some of the areas where there is some broad latitude in how Oregon City can interpret that and implement these requirements. Again, we're coming to you guys relatively late in the process, but we got a lot of feedback here and already made preliminary recommendations. If you really don't like them, then we can still move on it. But essentially, there were some open-ended questions about how the code can be structured regarding the redevelopment of those underused off-street parking spaces. There was a heck of a lot of discussion, as I said, around the choice between a tree canopy or solar panels. There was also a third option that folks generally were fairly lukewarm on, which allowed you to charge a fee in lieu. If you don't know what that is, what it sounds like. I don't want to follow this requirement. Okay, then you will have to pay $1,500 or more per parking space. There wasn't a lot of interest in that from the various boards, commissions, and other folks who commented. Most people think that or thought that if a development necessitated a half acre or more of parking spaces, rather than put it just into a bank account where it may or may not ever get used for something else. And folks would rather just have that solar generation capability or the aesthetic improvements of the landscaping. So next slide, please. One thing I sort of glossed over here, you are required to meet EV charging minimums in certain spaces for multi-unit, or in certain cases, I guess only in one certain case, which is 5 or more unit residential development, multifamily residential development. There was a lot of discussion on the outreach process in terms of how best to accommodate this, making sure we keep the walkways clear, that sort of thing. Do we want to meet this requirement? Do we want to really push EV charging and have more than 40%, maybe 100% of spaces at multi-unit developments be EV ready? Some cities have done that, but our fairly broad consensus over the course of our outreach is let's just keep it at 40% and, kind of, again, trust the invisible hand. If there's more demand than that for EV parking, then hopefully developers will put that in. But on the flip side of that, we also wanted to be very cognizant around cost burdening developers. The charging could be relatively expensive, added to an already significant expense of building the parking space to begin with. So we want to be cognizant of that as well, and to make sure we're, considering the housing affordability issues and those sorts of things that the state wants us to be considering and implementing this.
And Brian, on that point, the requirement is just to put in the conduit, right? As far as it to actually put in the chargers.
Yeah, that's a good question, and another point I glossed over a little bit. The requirement is for the conduit, and I think the source of that, as they were putting together these rules, there are two separate charging standards that were kind of, like VHS and Betamax. I said that in front of Planning Commission and Cornelius last night. But not leastly, parking. Bike parking we talked about already. There was some discussion about how to accommodate e-bikes, cargo bikes, family bikes, but by and large, your spacing standards in the bike parking design standards are pretty good. So I think they're in compliance with what the state is trying to do there in terms of accommodating the range of bikes as people move from we all rode 10 years ago to long tails, electric bikes with front cabins for the kiddos and that sort of thing. And now we're on to my last point. Parking maximums there. So Oregon City is above 25,000. I think we're about 40,000. So you are required to adopt one final piece of legislation, which is the parking maximums. Now you're only required to adopt those within that transit buffer area. A couple things shape this. Number one, you already have parking maximums that meet or exceed the standards that you're required to adopt within the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. I think Metro required parking standards a couple of years ago when Oregon City adopted those. So you're in compliance except with multifamily housing, which has to be reduced. The maximum for that has to be reduced a little bit. A key question over the course of the outreach was, well, do we want to do that just within the transit buffer as we're required to, or should we do that citywide? And there was a fairly broad consensus on that point. I think that just for the simplicity of having one code, one set of maximums apply to the entire city, let's just put them in citywide. That's essentially the long and short of it. The next slide, I think, will detail the process, which again, this has been going on from the city's perspective for a couple of years now. I jumped on toward the middle of last year and took it through the ad hoc advisory committee that we formed over the last few months. We've been taking it to members of the public as well as the standing commissions. And over the next few months, it's a type 4 adoption process. That means planning commission makes a recommendation, city council over the course of 2 meetings, hopefully approves it, and everything is everything is enacted by June 30th. I am not sure what happens if we don't enact it. My best guess is they kick you out of the state and you have to join California. So enjoy that sales tax. Enjoy the income tax. Yeah, right. Maybe Idaho.
Maybe, Idaho Peninsula or, Idaho.
Greater Idaho.
The state of Canada.
Yes. Maybe.
Yeah, I would just add that as a metro city, we have enacted a lot of these regulations already.
Yeah.
We have shared parking allowances for people to, share parking that they're not using within 1,000 feet of their proposed use. So if somebody moves in and they have a small restaurant, but not much parking, but they can negotiate with an adjacent owner to do that. One example. And then, we have to modify some of the maximum parking ratio requirements for multifamily in particular. There's no review requirement under the zoning code for parking in those areas. So we're largely targeting off-street parking requirements for non-residential and multifamily uses in these climate-friendly areas.
So Pete, is this retroactive? I mean, are they going to require existing?
No, it won't be requiring existing parking lots to do it, but it wouldn't stop someone from redeveloping their existing parking if they wanted to put in an extra tree canopy or solar charger or parklet or outdoor seating, let's say, or bike park. Yeah.
Would there be fund? Is there grants or something available?
That's a great question. It's like, what level does the city want to accommodate and incentivize and provide funding for redevelopment in the form of some dedicated fund? Mm-hmm. If, for example, we charge $1,500 for each space that someone wanted to build but couldn't. Mm-hmm. So, that's something the city commission will have to wrestle. Yeah.
All right. Any questions?
I have a curiosity question. Take an existing building like the library that expanded. How is that dealt with in terms of parking requirements?
Yeah, when the library expanded, it was 2012. There was some existing off-street parking in the lot. And then there was credit given for available on-street parking as well, curbside adjacent to the library, which has streets all around. So there's that. And being in a mixed-use area, institutional zoning area, it had some reduced parking requirements. I think the planning commission approved whatever parking you were able to find.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm remaining conspicuously silent.
Yeah. And then I don't know, there are some provisions for shared parking availability associated with adjacent uses as well, including the fire station and some city-owned land.
Pioneer Center.
Yeah, Pioneer Center, bingo. Yeah.
Great. Anything else?
Yeah, Mark, at the end of the day, who are we trying to motivate to change their behavior? Like a 4-bedroom apartment is not going to live within 2 spaces or 2.5 spaces max. Even they'll be all over the streets, all over the neighborhood. But restaurants, especially downtown, they're all over the streets. People wait until the meters go free. And with the courthouse moving in May or June, that's going to change the dynamics downtown a lot. I think people will go more to the restaurants than park.
Yeah.
But who are we trying to modify the behavior?
I think it's us talking about modifying behavior is looking at the true value of real estate and how it's used and how valuable it is. And we don't want to create, barriers to redevelopment of some of these areas. And the more value is created in these higher density areas, the harder it is to redevelop it when you have a very prescriptive minimum parking requirement. So there's that aspect of it as well. But in terms of changing behavior, it may have the effect on people finding parking less convenient and having to find an alternative. But I don't know if we're targeting people. And there is an equity aspect to this where we have to look at multifamily in particular and accommodate a certain amount of electrical vehicle charging for that. So I don't know, Ron.
Yeah, I mean, so that's sort of the meta question, right? What the heck are we trying to do here?
Apartments with 4 vehicles, to get rid of 2 of them because they're inconvenient, or they're just they're not going to drive any differently, probably. If they use 2 regularly and the other 2 are just junkers and they drive once a month, then, we're not changing the environmental issues.
That seems like that bigger transportation plan that you mentioned, like there's a larger thought about the public transportation, bike lanes.
Well, for the specific notion too, I think this is a good example of like the minimum parking requirements are sometimes a little, how do we set them? I would push back against the notion that a 4-bedroom apartment would have 4 driving adults living in it. I would assume a 4-bedroom apartment would be something like, 2, maybe mom, pa, the grown kid. What you're trying to do is prevent this thing where you have parking lots that are super, super oversized to begin with. So how do you do that? That is the kind of what the state settled on. And I think there's actually not to do that and to provide the right amount of parking there. And if I'm a developer or business person worth my salt, that's just going, especially the lenders are very particular about wanting to make money and are famous for I think the answer is whoever the heck can get to self-select to live in an apartment without parking or to live, obviously easier in Portland than Oregon City, but my wife and I share one car, so, both. And it's 45 in nightmare traffic from Portland, it's 20 going back. So that's the other piece of that, beyond the scope of my contract, unfortunately, it's unsatisfying. But I do think there's a piece that for that behavior change.
Thanks, guys.
All right, the next item is Books on Wheels overview. I can see you are here.
Speaking of.
Hopefully that's somewhere to park, so you can when you're delivering those books.
Equitable started a new collaboration with the Pioneer Center and their Meals on Wheels program. And we're super excited about this collaboration. It's been an easy one to start up because their vetting process is it aligns with what we need to check to make sure that any patient, and if they express interest, they return the completed application to their driver. The driver then brings them into the Pioneer Center and they're forwarded onto us. We reach out with a welcome letter and touch base with them to see whether they can put things on hold themselves or need help with that. Their clients into their accounts. I think in your packet, there's the application that they're given, the welcome letter, as well as a mock-up of the totes that ordered. Canvas totes with the library logo and then the Books on Wheels.
So do you have plans already for the Books on Wheels?
Giving them a call and making contact and see if we can get them involved.
That's great.
So, yeah.
I just love this notion of piggybacking on a program that's successful.
Yes.
That's already there. It's
Yep.
people, they know each other.
Yes.
It's trusting, but it's really smart.
And the drivers on those wheels have really great relationship with their clients, and so they can talk it up, and it's another.
The interest is, I mean.
Rolls out, I don't think it happened in.
Right, I would just be curious, when you talk about staff time, like what capacity might look like, or like concern-wise, what might be end up being something.
Yeah, I think Greg and Lisa have been really great about touching base on that. And I think the two folks that are on
This covers
they
versus kind
actually
of like,
cover, they do whatever service area, they cover also the Westland and kind of go toward Ella. But we, our, this program is just for folks in the city because that's our service area.
You wouldn't be somebody in Beaver Creek. So how do the books physically get from here to there?
We walk the book once a week. So,
So the book like take them over.
yeah.
Oh, and I was thinking more pneumatic, we always say we want pneumatic tube systems.
all the city.
Yeah, for all facilities.
Like in the old J.C. Penney's.
Yeah, chime in on, the things we talked about. I put in the packet, I know it's hard to read there, that is the updated, kind of 10-year forecast that we had done, 2 years ago. And the main thing I shared with the subcommittee in terms of this forecast, I've also shared with the finance department and city administration, is, pretty much the same as last time. We're pretty good for a few years, for 6 or 7 years. The debt being paid off in 10 years will be nice. The thing that is of the most concern to me right now, and which I've shared with our city administration, is that our capital needs, our capital replacement needs. This year, I was able to pop those in the appropriate budget year. I've shared with this body meeting, we have a report from a consultant who came through and looked at the entire facility and said, okay, based on average lifespans, you're going to need to replace your floor in these years, your carpet in these years, and your HVAC in these years. And so in 2030 and 31, that biennium, there's about $1.5 million potentially of capital repair and replacement that is going to be needed in order to keep this facility operating and running well. That's a big hit to our fund balance. We're going to be using a little bit of fund balance going forward. Once we hit that, in absent any other funding mechanism or any change in the district rate or anything like that, that represents a big hit, and we don't necessarily have a great revenue stream, to pay for that. So it's after that, in a couple of years, we start to get to the point where our fund balance is less than what our finance department has said we need to keep in the bank. It's about 52% is what we're aiming for. So there's no answers right now, but it's just something I want to assure everybody that I do keep that front and center with our finance department. One of the great things is we're using new software to do budgets this year. That new software does have a forecasting component built in, and our finance department is very, very supportive of departments starting to use that. So I do plan to transfer this into that forecasting component to that.
It's also another lever for us to get support from the city commission for a new district rate, if we get to that point in the coming years, which we anticipate we will.
The other things, I'll just hit the highlights of some of the things that we talked with the budget committee about. These are things that I did include in our initial budget requests that went to the finance department. In terms of staffing, the way that city administration had asked us to submit our budgetary requests is, kind of do a current services, budget at current levels, and then we have add-ons. Each add-on is a separate request they can evaluate and run numbers for separately. So some of the staffing add-ons we asked for we have about 5 part-time staff members who we could, I hate putting it like this, but we could offer them a few more hours a week, which would really help us operationally while still keeping them at the same benefit too. So that is a fairly inexpensive way to give them more opportunities to work more, gives us a little more stability. So we did put that in. I want to say all told, all of those together, it was probably no more than $30,000-$40,000 a year, which is not
A huge ask.
For new staff, we did indicate we would like to explore an additional manager for the library. I shared with the subcommittee, I shared our org chart. As I think I've mentioned to the whole group, we have about 30 employees right now. In a few months, it may be closer to 32 or 33, because we have to get some more on calls. And there's Denise and myself as the managers for that. And it's a lot. And so, city administration has recognized that this is a risk, and this is something that we'd like to accommodate. So we have put in a request, to look at those numbers. Also put in a request for another part-time employee to help in our current in the computer lab area. That is probably the area that we are still most reliant on calls, benefits, and figured if we were able to add another 0.65 FTE to that would help with some stability, some staffing stability, and help us continue to move towards more of our staff having some level of benefits. So those are the staffing asks. I will say, I shared with the group, city is just starting union negotiations with both the police and ASPE. We don't know what that's going to result in. We did do a little bit of an analysis, and right now the benefit load, we just had this refresh for us today at an early meeting, for an $80,000 a year employee, just salary employee, the budgeted benefit load is now the model here. So those are the staffing ones. For the kind of capital projects, some of the bigger projects, we forwarded the budget, the vehicle, the book lockers. Most of our other capital projects we think we're going to get done this year. We did put in this biennium. Probably the biggest one is, in having just done the floor, I hate to say this, but the carpet is next. So as part of our repair replace schedule, this carpet needs to be done this biennium. So that's going to be a big chunk of change for doing that. We need to do the parking lot, the staff parking lot across the street. The asphalt is not in good condition. We got some estimates from the Public Works Department and some vendors. And as with anything, you can do the Band-Aid fix for cheaper, or you can do a much better fix for longer, and we decided to budget for fix. So we're estimating that's going to be in the $40,000 range to scrape off 3 inches of asphalt, put it all down, you redo it. We will have to restripe the parking spaces, because I don't think we're currently compliant with ADA.
This is a lot next to the Friends bookstore.
Yeah. So that's one of our big ones. We put in some money for, it's about time to update the furniture that we have in the community room that we use for programs and for people using the room. We want to update that. We also want to make it a little more flexible, so not just, we want to have more options than just big rectangular tables. Some rectangles, some smaller square ones, circular ones, to help make that a little more flexible space. We also put in some money for redoing, upgrading the audiovisual in the community room, the centralizing and standardizing communications and branding out to the community, which is a great thing and really helps people. Better information, more timely information, more consistent information. So we did suggest that we would be in favor of helping to fund a new position in the communications department along with a couple of other departments. And so I did build in some extra allocated costs. Yeah, so it would be another person in the communications department that would also help take off some of the load of what we have to do internally, like trail news. We have to put together our pages of trail news, and to me, that's not a great use of our staff resources. I would just love to be able to say, here's our content. Make it all happen. And we would still keep some of our social media, to do the fun stuff, but a lot of these today, I'd have to go talk to Pioneer Center, because the staff member who's been helping with a lot of that works at Pioneer Center. So it's possible that Parks is also doing some reconfiguration of their staff to allow that person to focus more on these events and offload some of those. So, but yes, that is
big impact on your life and on
Yes, they do. So, and I know the commissioners are well aware of that situation, and I know they all, everybody loves having these events.
Yeah.
And I think if we want to do them and do them efficiently, do them well, that's resources. You put the resources for your priorities. I believe that's a community priority. We'll see how.
All right, any questions for Greg so far? Are we gonna have any more budget committee?
I just got an email today about the next step of the budget process. So I believe our next meeting, Tony, city manager, is, I want to say it's March 10th. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. I don't yet have anything back from finance to share with the committee. We can certainly schedule another meeting, and if I have information to share, I can. I want you to feel part of the process.
Oh, yeah. When do the hearings start, the budget committee hearings?
Late.
Oh,
I will get the
yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So, great.
But yeah, if we would, maybe if it's acceptable to the chair and the rest of the board, I will do a little work to figure out what the next schedule is, and we can set aside either the Friday, go a week from this Friday or 2 weeks from this Friday. It's another opportunity to meet, and if there's
Just reasonably.
yeah.
That sounds good.
So we're working on selecting a caterer. We have the music arranged. There will be brief presentations by some, interested parties, but there'll be no speaker this year. Because we're kind of highlighting the technology and a couple of technology surprises, and Greg's gonna talk about, the library and moving forward beyond the walls, and that will do it.
Great.
So it's gonna be a great event. You'll get a free adult beverage with your ticket, and then you can buy additional beverages as you see fit.
Is there gonna be a silent auction like last?
Yes, there'll be a raffle.
So you do.
Actually, I think they're going to do both.
I'm gonna say,
yeah.
and there's going to be a silent auction. So
Okay, so if you follow up with that.
So it's going to be, I think, a really nice event. We're looking forward to the venue at Ainsworth House. We're going in a week or two to visit the site to see how we want to set it up and finalizing all the details. So,
Friends?
The bookstore continues to be very successful. I'm getting tired of saying that over and over. In fact, it's so successful that it's becoming obvious that they have to start following standard business practices in a lot of areas. So the last meeting was primarily devoted to talking about essential insurance coverage for the officers and the volunteers, as well as liability.
I mean, in the midst of a world where book banning and all this